The lecture hall of Orbital Academy 9 shimmered under its bioreactive lighting, the walls a slow ripple of purple and turquoise responding to student presence. In the second row, a trio of Cathari exchanged clicks of excitement. Real ones, not metaphorical, since their vocalizations naturally clicked when giddy. Hovering just above them in a containment bubble was a singing thal moth, its wings glowing faint lavender with every trill. Professor Ilix took center stage, her translucent crest flushed with teal, the Ajurian equivalent of high enthusiasm. Her limbs, all six, moved in elegant arcs as she activated the holopodium. As part of our interspecies cultural immersion initiative, you are to bring a pet to our next class meeting, she said in Galactic Standard, her tone buoyant. This is not a competition. The goal is to share companionship traditions, emotional bonding practices, and to examine domestication's cultural role in your society. The classroom buzzed. Eager voices rose in multiple languages, discussing which docile fluffball or singing creeper would be best received. Onyx beetles, puff gliders, even a few aquatic lensfish in mobile globes. Daniel raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. His left hand absently scratched the back of his neck. He had already decided what he'd bring. When the class reconvened 2 standard days later, the mood was jubilant. A float reef bubbled softly near the ceiling, dispersing tiny bioluminescent droplets that danced in formation, a gift from a proud Hydran student. Next to it, a sand table carried a phasing burrower that shifted between colors with emotion, like a living mood ring. A long-limbed Gelvarian rolled in with a chirruping fluflet, a creature so soft it had to be contained within an anti-static field, or it would simply collapse under its own plush. Then came the sound. A low, controlled growl reverberated down the corridor. Every alien in the room turned toward the door in a synchronized ripple of alarm. Desks subtly shifted back. One of the Qatari students let out an involuntary hiss. And then Daniel walked in. Straining against the thick leash in his right hand was a massive, steel-gray wolfdog. Its coat gleamed with health, hackles slightly raised, golden eyes scanning the unfamiliar environment. It was easily over 100 pounds, its gait low and confident, its chest broad and bristling with power. It paused just past the doorway, sniffed the air, then sat on its haunches, tail thumping once, with a dull whap against the floor. Several students instinctively pressed back against their chairs. One knocked over a desk. The singing moth stopped trilling entirely. Professor Ilix froze, her crest turning a warning amber. "Mr. Daniel, what is that?" Daniel didn't flinch. "This is Rocco," he said, giving the leash a gentle tug. The wolfdog immediately stood, then sat again on command. "He's my dog. Well, wolfdog, technically. Half Alaskan Malamute, half gray wolf. Trained, socialized, and vaccinated, if you're wondering." "He's enormous," whispered a Trinit student, trying to shield its jellied pet behind a translucent wing. "And carnivorous," added a Qatari, tail twitching erratically. "I smell blood in its breath." "Well, yeah," Daniel replied matter-of-factly. "He eats meat, mostly chicken, beef sometimes, deer if we're in the mountains. He's got a varied diet." "You keep this predator in your home?" Professor Ilix's voice was still calm, but the amber in her crest now glowed like a warning flare. Daniel nodded. "Since he was 5 weeks old. Sleeps at the foot of my bed, knows over 50 commands. Never bitten anyone, not even once." "You expect us to believe that thing is safe?" The Gelvarian student chittered, recoiling toward the ceiling. "It has fangs longer than my thumb. It is not a pet, it is a bioweapon." "Rocco," Daniel said quietly. The wolfdog shifted. Down. Rocco dropped onto his belly, paws crossed like a statue, golden eyes flicking from alien to alien. "Roll." With a grunt, the wolfdog turned, belly exposed, tail wagging once. "He's submissive right now," Daniel explained. "You can see the body language. Ears low, tail relaxed, eyes not fixed on anyone. If he were even thinking of aggression, you'd know." Silence stretched long. Then came the whispers. "It has to be a stunt. He's bluffing. No way that thing doesn't eat him eventually." "He's bluff. Are humans just built without fear responses?" Professor Ilix made a note on her console. For now, you may stay, Daniel. But any aggression, and I will be forced to evacuate the room and call security. Daniel nodded. Understood. He led Rocco to an empty section and sat cross-legged. The wolf dog circled once and lay down, its massive head resting on Daniel's thigh. The class remained frozen. The comparisons were inevitable. A slim, blue-tinged student from the Vesh presented her hover lantern shrimp. It changed color and rhythm with her voice. A gentle, living ambient light. It only eats plankton, she said proudly. A bubble-headed Glarn showed off its pet named Luli, a near-translucent orb that vibrated with calming frequencies. She cannot move on her own, it said fondly. We carry her always. Then someone coughed. Rocco's ears twitched. He shot to his feet, body coiled like a spring, a low bark erupting from his chest. Pandemonium. A Qatari leaped onto a desk. The Glarn flung itself under its chair. Someone screamed. Daniel stood instantly, grabbing the leash. Sit. Rocco hesitated. Sit! The wolf dog obeyed. Instantly. Like a switch had flipped. Down. Back on his belly. Daniel turned to the class. He thought the cough was a threat. That's how they work. Always alert. But he listened to me. You saw that. Professor Ilix exhaled, though her crest stayed amber. You maintain control through verbal cues? And gestures, sometimes eye contact. It's about trust. He knows I'll protect him, and he's trained not to act unless I tell him to. A Qatari raised its hand. Are you not afraid he'll change his mind one day, snap, revert to instinct? Daniel paused. That risk is real. With any animal. But so is the bond. It's not about control. It's about trust, repetition, and consistency. You don't raise something like Rocco with fear. You raise it with structure. It's not perfect, but it's honest. The Vesh student tilted her head. Wouldn't it be simpler to keep a harmless creature? Something bred to be safe? Daniel smiled faintly. Sure. Safer. But humans, well, we didn't evolve in safe places. We grew up with wolves at the edge of the firelight. Some of us invited them in. Professor Ilix rubbed her frontal crest. This lesson is straying into ethical gray zones. And that's the point of the assignment, isn't it? Daniel asked. To understand what we consider companions. Pets, partners. Rocco isn't a tool, he's family. The class didn't know what to say. But for the first time, no one was screaming. One of the Hydran tentatively raised a limb. May I offer a digit? For scent sampling? Daniel grinned. Hold it low, slow movements, and don't stare into his eyes. The wolf dog sniffed the approaching tentacle, then gave it a single lick. There was a collective gasp. The classroom, still uncertain, slowly buzzed to life again. Rocco yawned, revealing a maw of polished canines sharp enough to slice through tendon. The gesture, innocent, instinctual, was met with instant stillness. Every alien who had begun to relax stiffened again. Even the bravest Hydran who had offered a limb for sniffing retracted it as though burned. Daniel stayed seated, casually brushing a few shed hairs off his pants. That wasn't a threat, just a dog being a dog. Professor Ilix tapped something on her holopad. Your continued participation in this lesson is under academic review, Daniel. However, the data is invaluable. He nodded without resentment. Understood. Across the room, the Glarn's pet Luli began vibrating with distress, emitting a low hum that triggered sympathetic flickers in the nearby lantern shrimp. A chain of reactions rippled through the non-human pet's singing, glowing, twitching, burrowing, until Rocco lifted his head and let out a single, confused bark. Instant silence. Professor Ilix raised two hands. Let us now engage in structured comparison. Each of you will describe your pet's purpose, limitations, and emotional compatibility. We shall see what patterns emerge. The first student, a small coral-colored entity from the Driel Coalition, raised its fin hand. My Lumo slug provides passive companionship. It thrives on ambient warmth and secretes a neuro-soothing mucus. I require no vocal interaction. It remains pleasant to look at and needs very little to survive. The slug on its shoulder blinked slowly. Daniel tilted his head. Do you interact with it, though? Play? Train? The Driel blinked its two eyes asynchronously. Interact? It is an accessory. I meditate beside it. Murmurs of agreement followed. A Frel student, whose form shimmered with tiny embedded biolights, gestured to its floating moon lichen. This creature changes hues in response to emotion. It is attuned to my bioelectric field. We are in symbiosis. We avoid negative stimuli together. Daniel studied the hovering lichen for a moment. Can it survive on its own? The student blinked, confused. Why would it need to? Rocco, from his spot on the floor, let out a contented woof and adjusted his head onto Daniel's boot. Professor Ilix narrowed her eyes. Daniel, describe the parameters of your relationship with Rocco in measurable terms. He scratched behind the wolf dog's ear. He doesn't just follow orders, he thinks. Sometimes I'm not even sure I'm in charge. He's not an accessory, he's a partner. If we're out in the wild, I trust him to watch my back. A student from the insectoid-dominated world of Taraxes buzzed, antennae stiff with disbelief. You trust a fanged predator with your life? Daniel didn't blink. Yeah. The Taraxian shivered. We removed all predatory traits from our domestic species generations ago. This concept is antithetical to survival. Daniel considered that, then looked down at Rocco. If we removed everything that could ever harm us, we'd be alone. A ripple of unease went through the room. Then, perhaps unintentionally, Rocco sneezed. Loudly. The sound was followed by a moment of dead silence, then a squeal from the K-Tari, who leapt onto its hover desk again. It expelled internal matter, it shrieked. Daniel tried not to laugh. He just sneezed. Clearing his nose. It happens. But it's uncontained, the Qatari said, still perched like a horrified statue. You're sharing air with a creature that emits fluids by reflex? Daniel shrugged. Welcome to the human respiratory system. He's not sick. That's just fur and dust. Professor Ilix stared at him. And if he were ill? I'd keep him quarantined, just like I would myself. Another hand tentacle rose. It belonged to a Molari student, whose pet resembled a floating bag of ink-filled jelly. Why, the student asked slowly, do humans consistently tolerate unpredictable biological volatility in companion species? Do you not prioritize environmental sterility? Daniel ran a hand through his hair. We don't live in sterile environments, not for long anyway. Even on ships, we have plants, soil, dogs, cats. Hell, my cousin has a parrot that screams curse words in the middle of the night. A few students looked genuinely disturbed. But why? Asked the Hydran, voice wavering between curiosity and horror. Daniel smiled. Because perfection isn't the goal. Connection Island. Rocco thumped his tail once, as if in agreement. Professor Ilix moved to initiate the next demonstration, but was interrupted by a sudden thump at the far wall. A maintenance panel had fallen, likely a fluctuation in the gravity stabilizers. Innocuous, but loud. Rocco launched to his feet in a single motion, body tense, ears perked. His growl was low and unmistakably primal. Desk scraped. A chair overturned. One alien bolted toward the exit. Rocco, Daniel said, sharp but steady. The wolf dog didn't move. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Rocco and the rest of the class. He squatted low, meeting the animal's eyes. Not a threat. Not a threat. Rocco's ears flicked. He looked again toward the wall. Then, slowly, Saturday. Daniel let out a breath. Good boy. The classroom was quiet. Then Professor Ilix exhaled. Long and deliberate. This is instructive. That such a creature reacts to stimuli with threat assessment, yet can override it when instructed. She trailed off, crest now a thoughtful blend of purple and silver. The Vesh student leaned forward. He chose not to act? Daniel nodded. Every time, it's a choice. He's not a robot. He just trusts me enough to believe what I'm saying. Another pause. Then a voice soft, hesitant from the back. A small, pale student whose species Daniel hadn't learned yet. Do you ever fear not being enough? That your trust might fail? Daniel's smile faded a little. Of course. He's strong enough to kill me. That's always been true. But that's what makes it real. He doesn't follow me because he's forced to. He does it because we've built something. Over years, not days. Professor Ilix tapped a command and dimmed the lights slightly. Let us enter reflection. 10 minutes of quiet synthesis. Each student is to consider their species' threshold for risk in pursuit of companionship. The room fell silent. Rocco lay down again. This time, he didn't keep his eyes open. Daniel sat back, legs stretched, and let his hand rest on Rocco's neck. The steady thump of a pulse beneath fur reassured him more than any cultural commendation. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the Qatari student creeping closer. Not by much, just 2 cautious steps. Its voice was barely audible. Would he accept food from another? Daniel smiled again, gentler now. You'd have to ask him. I do not know how. Offer your hand, closed. Let him smell it. If he licks, you're good. There was a long hesitation. Then, with trembling limbs, the Qatari extended a clenched hand, trembling only slightly. Rocco sniffed it once. Then licked. The Qatari let out a sound like a sneeze, and a whimper merged. He is wet. That's normal, Daniel chuckled. Professor Ilix looked up. Next cycle, we will explore symbiotic risk tolerance through historical context. For now, I believe the human has demonstrated something unexpected. Daniel glanced around. Most students were still on edge, but not frozen. Progress. One student raised a hand. Can I maybe touch the tail? Daniel considered it. If you give him a second, let him sniff you first. And no sudden moves. Another voice. Is he more wolf or more dog? Daniel shrugged. Depends on the day. Professor Ilix made another note, her crest a peaceful indigo. Class dismissed. Daniel, Rocco, thank you for the demonstration. Rocco stood on command, stretched with a yawn, then padded calmly beside Daniel to the exit. Behind them, a dozen alien eyes followed the tail, the steady gait, the bizarre sense of peace. And something else. Something almost like admiration. It had been 4 standard days since the pet demonstration. In the days that followed, Orbital Academy 9 remained subtly changed. Not outwardly, perhaps no signs, no memos, but in the quiet moments between lessons, in the hallways and common areas, things felt charged. Aliens, by nature, were observant. Many species in the class had evolved in predator-rich environments, developing keen senses for body language, spatial awareness, and the emotional undercurrents of a room. Now, with Rocco's presence lingering in memory like a shadow on the wall, every twitch of a breeze or cough in the corridor made some heads turn a second time. And yet, something else had taken root. Curiosity. Daniel noticed it during his evening walk. He always took Rocco for 2 laps around the habitat ring after lessons. At first, those walks had been solitary. Aliens gave a wide berth, often vanishing behind corner bulkheads or ducking into side halls. But now, there were followers. Not close, never within arm's reach, but always a few steps back. A Qatari child pretending to read a datapad, glancing up every few seconds. A frail couple whispering about Rocco's gait. One daring drill even attempted a sketch, though the moment Rocco sneezed, the pen shot from its flipper. Daniel didn't mind. He knew what this was. The first step toward understanding was observation. And sometimes, he even caught Rocco noticing. The wolf dog was changing to less on edge, less coiled like a spring. He still scanned corners, still tensed at unexpected noises, but there was less suspicion in his posture, just alertness, awareness. Daniel had grown up with animals, and knew the distinction intimately. Look at you, he murmured, during one walk, giving Rocco a pat on the flank, winning hearts and minds, without even trying. Rocco sneezed again. I'll take that as modesty. The next class session was relocated to the open Arboretum dome. Whether for safety or comfort, Daniel didn't ask. He liked the greenery anyway. Trees, real soil underfoot, simulated sky with a false sun that moved too fast. Rocco loved it too. More scents, more distractions, more challenges. When they arrived, the other students were already arranged in a wide circle around the grass clearing. This time, there were no gasps. No one bolted. A few stared, one waved. Professor Ilix, standing beneath a vibrantly fake maple tree, acknowledged them with a gesture. Daniel. Rocco. We are proceeding with the behavioral segment today. Observation of unscripted interaction. No commands. We wish to study instinct. Daniel raised a brow. You want to see what he does without input? Correct. All animals will be off restraint, within reason, leashed only if unsafe. Daniel hesitated, fingers tightening on Rocco's harness. He met the wolf dog's eyes. You good with this? He murmured. Rocco tilted his head, then nudged Daniel's knee. Professor Ilix noted the exchange. Is that a scent? Yeah, Daniel said quietly, unclipping the leash. But just so we're clear, if anything spooks him, I intervene. Of course. Around the circle, alien pets were already emerging from carriers or containment bubbles. The fluflet unfurled from its anti-static nest and immediately burrowed into the grass, whimpering softly. The thal moth began to hover in lazy spirals. The gelatinous mood creature rolled in slow arcs, unintentionally bumping into the dreel's slug, which responded by going rigid with stress. And Rocco? He trotted into the center of the field, tail raised, tongue lolling. He sniffed the air, then circled once before sitting calmly, nose twitching toward the moth's pheromone trails. No growls. No lunges. Just interest. He's not attacking, one student whispered, shocked. Why would he? Daniel replied. He's curious, not hungry. But he could, the Hydran said softly, at any moment. Daniel nodded. Sure, that's the risk. That's trust. 10 minutes into the observation, the first real test came. The insectoid student's fluflet, frightened by a sudden shift in light, let out a high-pitched squeal and began darting in frantic loops. Most pets ignored it. A few hissed or recoiled. Rocco stood immediately. His muscles rippled, head high, ears forward. The fluflet tore past him, a blur of white fluff and static discharge. Rocco gave chase. Rocco! Daniel barked, stepping forward, but Professor Ilix held up a hand. Wait, she said, her crest a storm of conflicted colors. Let the behavior play out. Daniel clenched his fists but obeyed. Rocco closed the distance in seconds. The fluflet screeched, trying to dodge under a bench, but stumbled over a root. Rocco reached it. And stopped. He lowered his head, nose touching the terrified creature. Then he Saturday. The fluflet trembled once, then curled into a fluff ball and went completely still. Rocco remained beside it, breathing slowly. No growl, no paw, no teeth. Just presence. Professor Ilix exhaled. He did not strike. No, Daniel said. He assessed. Realized it wasn't a threat or prey. He sat with it instead. No. And if he had chosen differently? I would have stepped in. But I didn't have to. A Qatari whispered. He acted like a sentient. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't need to. After the test, Professor Ilix allowed small groups to interact with Rocco under supervision. Volunteers only. At first, no one moved. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the Qatari approached. Not the same student as before, a different one. Shorter, younger. Its tail twitched nervously. I brought dried fruit, it offered, holding out a glimmering piece of dehydrated fazberry. Can he eat this? Won't hurt him, Daniel replied. Rocco, treat. Rocco stood and trotted over, sniffing the alien's outstretched hand. He took the fruit gently, chewed, then Saturday. The Qatari stared in silence, then laughed a trill-like sound that startled even itself. Soft bite pressure. Controlled. This is impressive. One by one, others joined. A Frel offered a palm frond. A Driel laid down on the grass beside Rocco, sketching in silence while the wolf dog dozed. A Taraxian watched from a distance, not approaching, but not fleeing either. Professor Ilix made constant notes, her crest now a swirl of complex thought patterns. Fascinating. The more time they spend near him, the lower the ambient stress markers. Daniel sat with his back to the tree, watching Rocco nap under an alien sundae. Yeah, he said softly. That's what happens when you give something dangerous a reason not to be. Would you say, she asked carefully, that Rocco's bond with you is emotional or utilitarian? Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Does he remain with you because of affection, or because you provide food, shelter, safety? He looked over at Rocco. The wolf dog opened one eye. Daniel smiled. Yes. Professor Ilix chuckled, a low, pleasant resonance. Humans remain a contradiction. Better to be confusing than predictable. She made a final note. Next session, we explore historical domestication models. You may bring Rocco again. Daniel nodded. He'll appreciate the walk. As the students began to leave, many paused to glance back. Some waved. One even asked if Rocco might be available for scheduled mutual observation, whatever that meant. Daniel leashed Rocco, gave his fur a ruffle, and began the walk back to the habitat wing. Behind them, the arboretum was quiet again. The grass held the paw prints of something dangerous, something trusted. A week later, the final session of the pet study module dawned beneath simulated storm clouds. The Academy's sky dome had been programmed to match weather conditions from Earth's Pacific Northwest at Daniel's suggestion. The air smelled of ozone and petrichor. Rain tapped gently on the arboretum canopy, just enough to mist the grass but not flood the ground. It reminded Daniel of home. Rocco trotted beside him, ears flicking at the dampness, but otherwise content. The wolf dog had adjusted to the Academy's rhythms with the same strange calm he applied to everything. If he noticed the glances from passing students less fearful now, more curious, he didn't show it. He just walked. At the arboretum gate, Professor Ilix waited. She wore a rain diffusion shawl over her carapace, and greeted them with a nod. Thank you for returning, Daniel. And Rocco. She turned slightly, crest pulsing faint blue. Today is reflection. No tests, no commands. Each student will share their understanding of what it means to live beside another species, especially one with the capacity for harm. Daniel nodded. Sounds like philosophy hour. Cultural anthropology, technically. But yes. Inside, the same circle was forming slightly tighter than before. Alien pets curled or floated near their students, some resting in laps, others roaming. The flooflet had grown bold enough to sniff Daniel's boots before darting away. Even the gelatinous mood creature, once immobilized by fear, now pulsed calming colors near Rocco's flank. Daniel unclipped the leash. Rocco gave a quick shake, then lay down at his usual spot, head high, watching. The Qatari began the discussion. I believed pets were companions meant only for softness, warmth, no challenge. Then I saw this. The student gestured at Rocco without looking directly at him. And I learned that challenge can be part of companionship. Fear doesn't have to mean danger. Not always. Next was the Frel. We were taught that instinct is to be bred out, not respected. Now I think perhaps instincts can be guided. Trained, not erased. More followed. The Drill. I did not understand loyalty. Now I do. It is not programming. It is choice. Repeated. The Glarn. My people fear unpredictability. But watching you two, I have learned that unpredictability is also potential. One by one, the students spoke, their words growing braver, less uncertain. And then, it was Daniel's turn. He stood, brushing damp grass from his sleeves, and looked around at the expectant faces. I grew up in Montana. We had animals all our lives. Horses, dogs, sometimes things we weren't supposed to have. My dad used to say, you don't own a creature with teeth. You borrow its trust. I didn't understand that until Rocco. The wolf dog flicked an ear, still watching. When I got him, I didn't think about how strong he'd be, or how much work he'd need. I just saw this scrappy half-wolf pup who looked like he'd fight a mountain lion if it came too close. First year? A nightmare. He chewed through my mattress, ate a shoe, snarled at every visitor. But every time I showed up, every time I didn't give up, he changed. Daniel took a breath. So did I. He glanced down at Rocco. This isn't about control or safety. It's about choice. I chose to raise something that could kill me because I believed it wouldn't. And every day since, he's chosen not to prove me wrong. Silence. Not fearful. Not stunned. Just silent. Professor Illich spoke last. In Agurian philosophy, we say that safety is an illusion, but trust is a foundation. I believe your demonstration has shown that more clearly than any lecture. She approached slowly, kneeling not quite at Rocco's level, but lower than her usual imposing height. "May I?" she asked. Daniel looked at Rocco. "Rocco, easy." The wolf dog sniffed her extended hand, then gave a single, approving huff. She placed a data crystal in Daniel's palm. "This contains the full class log, footage, and emotional telemetry, for your records. And, perhaps your people's archives." Daniel turned it over in his fingers. "Thanks. We'll put it to good use." As the session ended, and the students filtered out many, pausing to wave or offer a treat, Daniel leashed Rocco again. The walk back was quiet, peaceful, until a voice piped up behind him. "Wait." He turned. It was the Qatari student who'd offered the first treat that day. "I was wondering, could I, maybe, sit with him, for a few minutes, alone?" Daniel hesitated. Rocco looked up at him. "He's not a therapy animal." "I know. I'd like to try, if that's okay." Daniel gave a half smile. "You remember the rules? Don't look him in the eyes, don't touch without a sniff first, don't run." Daniel looked at Rocco again. The wolf dog gave the faintest tail wag. "All right," Daniel said. 5 minutes, I'll be nearby." The student crouched. Rocco moved closer, sat down, and eventually lay beside them. Daniel watched from a distance. It wasn't perfect trust, but it was the beginning of it. Later that evening, Daniel returned to his quarters and sat on the edge of his bunk, watching as Rocco curled on the padded floor mat. The wolf dog sighed and began licking a paw, nothing dramatic, just cleaning. Daniel opened his personal terminal and pulled up the class footage, letting it play in the background while he tapped out a message home. Subject: Pet day was weird. Body: You're not going to believe this, but Rocco might have just become the Academy's emotional support apex predator. Yeah, I know how that sounds. We'll explain everything when I get back. Might need a bigger leash. Tell Dad he was right. Trust isn't earned once. It's renewed. Every single day. Attached. One very tired,